When an INFJ goes rogue, the first signs often surface as a sudden silence that feels more like a strategic retreat than ordinary withdrawal, because their dominant introverted intuition needs space to remap the world when their ideals are violated. Their emotional warmth is replaced by a detached clarity that can feel unnerving to observers, because the same empathic radar that once cushioned others now pinpoints weaknesses with surgical precision. The traditional INFJ preference for mediation morphs into a willingness to confront, because they have concluded that indirect influence no longer suffices. They may wield silence as a weapon, allowing the absence of their support to highlight the failures of a system they once upheld. Simultaneously, they channel their formidable insight into one or two focused objectives, perhaps a cause, a creative project, or a sweeping life pivot, pouring in long, secretive hours with an intensity that feels almost obsessive even to themselves. Check out our INFJ Mastery course, an INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. Those caught in the blast radius experience a curious mix of admiration and caution. Formerly predictable empathy is replaced by a lone wolf leadership style, where the INFJ issues succinct directives rather than seeking consensus. Their communication becomes cryptic yet compelling, laced with symbolism or veiled references that signal they are many moves ahead in a private chess game. Because they still intuit emotional currents, they can manipulate group sentiment to advance a plan, even while appearing coolly detached. Physiologically, the stress of operating in this hyper-focused mode taxes their nervous system, leading to sleepless nights, adrenal fatigue, or creative burnout if the rogue phase drags on. Darker aesthetic tastes emerge as they gravitate toward films, books, or music that mirror their inner vigilance and confirm that shadow work, not sunshine, now fuels their intuition. The risk of tipping into paranoia grows. When every gut hit is trusted implicitly, imagined threats can masquerade as prophetic warnings. Professionally, they might execute an abrupt career pivot, dropping a stable path in favor of freelancing or activism, or they might remain inside an organization long enough to catalyze sweeping reform and then vanish before the dust settles. In personal relationships, partners and close friends feel the chill of an emotional winter. Conversations shrink to logistics, affectionate rituals disappear, and physical presence can no longer guarantee psychological access. Inside, the INFJ engages in a fierce debate between principle and compassion. Moments of guilt surface when they realize how radically they have reshaped their identity, yet they push those feelings aside to preserve momentum. They rationalize each cut tie as a necessary sacrifice to protect a higher vision, convincing themselves that short-term pain is the toll for long-term integrity. External observers often describe a rogue INFJ as enigmatic, even intimidating, yet undeniably magnetic. The aura of quiet power radiates because the INFJ is operating in alignment with an uncompromising inner script, and people sense that steel beneath the calm. Over time, however, the cost of sustained isolation and hypervigilance presses in. Without trusted confidants, the INFJ risks sliding into existential exhaustion, where once vibrant intuition produces only cascading worst-case scenarios. When an INFJ goes rogue, the transformation isn't just external, it's a profound internal mutation. Their once tightly held hope in humanity's goodness begins to decay, not through a single event, but through a slow accumulation of disappointment, hypocrisy, and betrayal that corrodes their worldview from the inside out. The idealism that once made them gentle becomes weaponized, reshaped into a tool of confrontation rather than compassion. They stop trying to fix people and systems and begin to expose them, sometimes ruthlessly, because they've concluded that truth without polish is more necessary than comfort wrapped in illusion. The INFJ's uncanny ability to read beneath the surface takes a sharper edge. Where they once used their insight to anticipate needs and provide healing, now they use it to unearth manipulation, deceit, and power dynamics others try to keep hidden. This shift can make them formidable opponents because they don't just see what's happening, they understand why it's happening and can predict how people will react when they're pushed out of their comfort zones. Instead of gently guiding someone to self-realization, The rogue INFJ may drop hard truths like detonations, time for maximum effect. Emotionally, they begin to treat vulnerability as a luxury rather than a necessity. Where they once offered open-hearted connection, now they offer calculated distance. Their warm presence becomes cold steel, calm, precise, and unyielding. They still care, but from afar, and in a way that prioritizes justice over empathy. They don't lose their feelings. They just become more selective in expressing them, especially if those feelings have been exploited in the past. Their introverted intuition takes on an apocalyptic tone, scanning for patterns not just of possibility, but of collapse. They begin to speak in themes of endings, rebirths, and revelations, using poetic or symbolic language to describe the dismantling of structures they once supported. They may withdraw from social environments entirely, not out of shyness, but out of the belief that silence is more honest than superficiality. In this state, solitude becomes sacred, even when it's laced with bitterness. The rogue INFJ becomes harder to influence, harder to reach, because they've unhooked themselves from external validation. They no longer seek understanding from others. Instead, they demand alignment with truth. Their energy shifts from nurturing to discerning. Every word they speak is measured for impact, not approval. They may burn bridges, not as an act of vengeance, but as a ritual of finality. Once an INFJ decides a chapter is over, they seal it shut with eerie conviction, often leaving others bewildered at the suddenness and certainty of their exit. Their creativity intensifies, but takes on a darker, more unfiltered tone. The art they produce in this phase, whether writing, music, design, or strategy, is raw, powerful, and often unsettling. It reflects the truths they've stopped sugarcoating. They speak in metaphors of transformation, of death and rebirth, of the sacred violence of growth. Their work no longer aims to comfort, it aims to awaken. Check out our INFJ Mastery Course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. In relationships, the INFJ's rogue period tests every bond. Shallow bonds collapse instantly, while deeper ones are forced to confront the unspoken tensions that were long ignored. Loved ones may feel like they're speaking to a new person because the INFJ no longer performs emotional labor on behalf of others. They demand mutual effort, reciprocity, and authenticity, or nothing at all. They may deliver final conversations with chilling clarity, stating their reasons without anger, just a crystalline resolve that can't be softened. The INFJ also becomes more experimental during this phase. They break their own rules, challenge their previous identities, and try on new roles, not to impress others, but to rediscover parts of themselves that were suppressed. Their wardrobe may change, their voice may lower, their gaze may grow steadier. They embody boundaries rather than merely setting them. The internal governor that once filtered their expression gets dismantled, allowing them to say and do what was once off limits, even taboo. They may attract a different kind of attention. Whereas they used to draw in people seeking healing, now they draw in those who crave depth, rebellion, or truth at any cost. Their presence becomes catalytic. Some admire them, some fear them, many misunderstand them, but no one forgets them. And yet, even as they burn and rebuild, INFJs don't lose their core essence. They are still driven by meaning. They still crave connection, but only the kind that survives fire. Their rogue era, though turbulent, is not a rejection of who they are. It is a purification, a way to reclaim authenticity after being diluted for too long. When an INFJ goes rogue, their soul becomes a crucible, burning away illusions, false obligations, and the roles they were conditioned to play. Their departure from who they should be is not chaotic, but deliberate. There's a chilling calm in the way they dismantle the versions of themselves others found convenient. They stop contorting to fit spaces that never really accepted the full scope of their depth. It's not a breakdown, it's a restructuring. The INFJ's usual loyalty, once given freely and without conditions, now becomes something earned. They no longer feel compelled to justify their silence, their decisions, or their departure. Emotional caretaking is replaced with emotional self-sufficiency. Where they once asked, "How can I help?" they now ask, "Is this worth my energy?" The shift is subtle but seismic. They no longer wait for permission to choose themselves. Their once soft compassion becomes sharper, not unkind, but exacting. They expect people to take responsibility for their actions and refuse to cushion the impact of truth with sugar-coated words. Instead of rescuing others from discomfort, they allow the weight of consequences to fall as they must. This is where their infamous door slam becomes more than an emotional cutoff. It becomes an existential rejection of anything that insults their integrity. Internally, the INFJ may feel like they're stepping through a mirror. The shadow aspects of their personality, repressed anger, cold logic, ruthless discernment no longer frighten them. They begin to integrate these elements, recognizing that kindness without boundaries is exploitation waiting to happen. Their relationship with their own darkness deepens. They understand that to truly serve their purpose, they must stop trying to be universally liked. In this rogue phase, they no longer fear being misunderstood. In fact, they may begin to prefer it. Obscurity offers them protection. They become more private, more selective, even secretive. They stop explaining their dreams, their methods, their next move. Mystery becomes their ally. They operate behind metaphor, behind symbolism, behind subtle cues only a rare few can decipher. While others scramble for validation and attention, the rogue INFJ observes quietly, pulling strings from behind the curtain. They start to question authority, not just external, institutional authority, but internalized structures too. Beliefs inherited from religion, family, culture, all come under scrutiny. They ask, does this still resonate with who I am becoming? If not, they release it, no matter how sacred it once was. This deconstruction may isolate them, but it also liberates them. They no longer measure their worth by how well they fulfill societal expectations. They start writing their own code. Spiritually, they might go through a rebirth, not necessarily through traditional practices, but through raw experience. Suffering becomes alchemy. Reflection becomes ritual. They may develop unconventional philosophies that make sense only in the language of intuition, language others can't easily understand. They commune with archetypes, dreams, symbols, nature. Logic no longer needs to explain what their soul already knows. Their relationships undergo intense reevaluation. Even long-term bonds are examined under new light. They don't end things impulsively. They end them once they realize the relationship was never fully real to begin with. And when they leave, it is clean. No games. No drama. Just finality. They often mourn quietly and deeply, but they don't return to things they've closed the door on. Their version of closure is internal. They carry the lesson, not the attachment. Over time, the fire that fuels their rogue era settles into a quiet ember, not extinguished, but controlled. They no longer feel the need to defend themselves so fiercely. They've seen the other side of their own morality and return with clarity. They become more grounded, more deliberate. The rage softens into purpose. The coldness warms into discernment. They forgive, not for others, but for themselves, to finally close the loop. And through it all, the INFJ becomes sovereign, not dependent, not reactionary, not performative. They emerge as someone whole and indivisible. Someone who knows that going rogue wasn't rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It was necessary evolution. It was the only path to authenticity, no matter how costly. And now that they've tasted that kind of freedom, they will never again accept a life of quiet compromise. Check out our INFJ Master Course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video.